decades, Iowa Press has brought you political leaders and newsmakers from across Iowa and beyond, celebrating more than 40 years of broadcast excellence on statewide Iowa public television. This is a special Iowa Press debate, live from Iowa Public Television's Maytag Auditorium in Johnston. Here is moderator David Yepsen.
In the past half-century of Iowa politics, Democrats have held Iowa's governorship for only a dozen years. The men and women standing behind podiums at IPTV tonight are all seeking the Democratic nomination for governor in a primary election only 3 weeks away. They are Cathy Glasson, a registered nurse and union leader from Coralville; Ross Wilburn, a former mayor of Iowa City; Dr. Andy McGuire, a Des Moines resident and recent chair of the Iowa Democratic Party; Nate Boulton, a state senator representing Des Moines; Fred Hubbell, a businessman from Des Moines; and John Norris, a former chief of staff to Governor Tom Vilsack, who also resides in Des Moines. We've expanded this program to 90 minutes in an effort to accommodate additional issues and questions among all 6 candidates, similar to Iowa Press. There are no set time limits, and candidate interaction will, as well as follow-up questions, are at my discretion and our fellow panelists here. We hope for a spirited and thorough debate of Iowa issues. Joining the conversation are political reporters Kay Henderson of Radio Iowa and James Lynch of the Gazette. Well, first of all, I want to start the questions just by thanking all of you for offering yourselves for public service. I know something about the life you lead on a campaign trail, so I want to thank you for that. I also hear from a lot of people who ask me, who's going to win? I don't know who they are. So let's open our conversation this evening, and I'll start with you, John Norris, and we'll give everyone time to answer this question. Who are you? How do you differentiate yourself from these other candidates? And maybe why are you the most electable in November?
Good. Thank you, David. Who am I? I'm a Southwest Iowa farm kid who's done work over my life in government, business, and politics. I was chief of staff to Governor Vilsack. I was chair of the Iowa Utilities Board. I owned a restaurant business, and now I own a small business in Des Moines. I was head of the State Farm Union Coalition in the farm crisis in the 1980s. Served in the Obama administration as the U.S. representative to the United Nations for ag policy and as a federal energy commissioner. I've spent my life fighting for economic and social justice. I believe to win this election, we have to have someone who's experienced in managing in government, managed at the state and federal level, and in business, particularly because Kim Reynolds' mismanagement of our government is what we have to draw a distinction on. And to go against her, we need someone who's actually can gain the trust of Iowans, that we're ready to step in day one and straighten out the mess that she's created.
Mr. Hubbell.
Thank you. So I'm a 5th generation Iowan and a lifelong progressive Democrat. I used to work in the private sector, run the Yonkers department store business in the 1980s during the farm crisis. After that, I was in charge of Equitable Life Insurance Company of Iowa with agencies all across Iowa and the rest of the country. Then Governor Culver asked me twice to go to work for state government. The first time was to lead the Iowa Power Fund, the chair of the board of directors there. For 4 years, we looked at 400 different investments, and invested in 60 of those to help Iowa continue to be a leader in renewable energy and renewable fuels all across Iowa. Then we had the film tax credit scandal, Department of Economic Development. Governor Culver asked me to go in there and fix the film tax credit scandal, and we did. We saved Iowans millions of dollars. So I've had a long career in both the private sector and the public sector delivering results. But my wife and I have also been very busy in the community we call Iowa. I used to chair the Planned Parenthood Board. I chaired the Simpson College Board, the Iowa College Foundation Board. My wife and I helped Broadlawn General Hospital expand their mental health services. She and I both worked in the environmental area, trying to improve our air and water quality for the last 10 or 12 years. Unfortunately, we haven't made enough progress in that area, but we've worked hard at it. So I think I'm a kind of a candidate that's got a lot of experience in the public and private sector delivering results, but I've also worked to support and improve the quality of life and the progressive values that make Iowa a special place.
Nate Boulton.
I'm Nate Boulton. I'm the state senator who represents East Des Moines and Pleasant Hill in the Iowa Senate. But I actually grew up in southeast Iowa. Columbus Junction is my hometown. My mom and stepdad still live on a heritage farm just outside of Columbus Junction, rural Louisa County. When we start talking about this election and the opportunity Democrats have here, we have a state that's on the brink. And when we start talking about how we are going to win in November, it's going to be narrowing that divide, urban versus rural, and bringing people together on our shared values. Something I've been proud to do in the Iowa Senate, standing up to some extreme legislation, standing with so many Iowans who are ready to stop fighting back and start pushing forward to a new vision for Iowa's future. We do that by showing Iowans that we share values in terms of fully funding our schools, making sure our economy works for everyone, doing the things we can to protect our natural resources while making sure Iowa feeds the world as well. When we talk about health care, it's an Iowa value to take care of each other. Those are things that I've been proud to fight for in the Iowa Senate, and I didn't wait for the Iowa Senate to start standing up to this administration. I'm proud of the work that I've done as a workers' rights attorney, standing up to this administration, taking them all the way to the Supreme Court when they've done things that have threatened the lives of vulnerable Iowans and demonized public employees.
Andy McGuire.
Well, it's great that you had this tonight. I'm a Waterloo native from a family of 8. My dad was a World War II veteran, came home and started a construction machinery business. My mom stayed home with us, and I learned about caring about others. And that's so important, I think, because I think people feel like we're not caring about them right now. When I go all over Iowa, that's what I hear. And that's why I became a medical doctor, Dave, because I could see the power of caring about other people, especially when they're sick or injured. But what I hear from Iowans all the time right now is they feel like they're having profits put ahead of people. And when I hear about the issues they're concerned about, it's the privatization of Medicaid. You ask the difference between me and Kim Reynolds. I actually have run a Medicaid program and gotten people healthier and done it in a good way. And right now we have a mess that they've created. And I have the expertise, I believe, to really change that and help people. We have a mental health crisis and substance abuse and addiction. I've worked with that in my healthcare career. I know how to fix that. And that's what I'm hearing about all over Iowa, that people are suffering. And right now we're not doing enough about that. I've certainly been a supporter of women's health, and what we've done recently with Kim Reynolds, there couldn't be a starker difference between where I stand and where Kim Reynolds stands. And then we talk about education. I've been a champion for early childhood education and making sure that every child in every zip code has good education, and I hear about that everywhere. So I think I have some unique expertise from my medical background and my education background that really make me uniquely qualified to take on Kim Reynolds and beat her.
Thank you. Ross Wilburn.
I'm Ross Wilburn, and I'm a proud graduate of Davenport Central High School, so public education product. I also went to the University of Iowa and have a master's of social work there. I am the candidate who has been elected to office 3 times. I've got 12 years of elected experience supporting the public and public issues. So I have more experience than everyone up here on the stage in terms of elected experience. I work at Iowa State University Extension and Outreach, serving Iowans with our staff in all 99 counties, including youth, with agricultural programs, 4-H youth development, economic development. All of these are issues which kind of cut across what folks are here tonight. I served in the Iowa Army National Guard, the 682nd Engineers in Davenport, so I know personally and with family members who served in the Army what it's like for families to have their loved ones serving and the support they need when they return home. I'm also a proud parent and have family members that are part of the LGBTQ+ community. And these and some other areas in terms of water, education, diversity, inclusion are issues that are important to Iowans and part of our Let's Be Iowa campaign.
And Cathy Glasson, who are you? How do you differentiate yourself, and why are you the most electable?
Well, thank you, and thanks for having us tonight. I'm Cathy Glasson. I grew up in the northwest corner of Iowa and Spencer. My parents were non-college educated. Dad was a semi-truck driver, and my mom worked at a Sears and Roebuck store. Back in those days, they both were middle-class Iowans that could raise 2 daughters and send us to college. This day in Iowa, that's not the opportunity that most Iowans are feeling. I'm not the typical candidate running for governor, and I'm very proud of that. I'm not an attorney. I'm not a wealthy businessman. I am not an insurance executive. I'm an intensive care unit nurse for over 20 years. I'm also a union leader and an organizer. I'm also a wife, a mother, and a grandmother. And I decided to run for governor because I was sick and tired of watching everyday Iowans and working people in this state getting beat up. And I believe the #1 job of a governor is to raise wages and improve the standard of living for every Iowan. Our campaign is about lifting up everyday Iowans to get engaged in the political process again and get them excited to go to the polls. That's why I'm running on the most bold progressive agenda of raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour. I'm the only Democratic candidate that's come out bold and first on 15 with the shortest amount of time frame to make that happen. I'm also a union leader that believes that we need to not only expand and reverse the attacks on unions, we need to make it easier for every worker to have a union no matter where they work, and reverse right to work state laws. And then I'm the only Democratic candidate from day one and still will commit to making sure that every Iowan has universal single-payer health care, which, unlike my opponents here today, they're great people, but no one here is standing on single-payer health care. So we are clearly a different campaign. I'm clearly a different candidate, and I know together we can build a bold, progressive Iowa if we let the people of Iowa lead.
Thank you. And here to take us into some of these very issues that you all have been talking about, Ken.
Candidates, let's talk specifics. As governor, you can do a lot of things, you just can't do everything. Mr. Boulton, what is the first bill that you would ask the legislature to pass if you are elected?
One of the first things we have to do is start treating our workers in this state with dignity and respect again. We saw a heartless attack on workers across the board this last legislative session. We saw those answering the sacred call of public service be told they're entitled to lesser and fewer rights in the workplace than every other employee in our state. We're talking about our teachers, our firefighters, our police officers, our social workers, our public health nurses, the people we need to build safe and strong communities. But it didn't stop there. It was an attack on the rights of those injured on the job, putting their bodies on the line for economic progress in our state, being told that they're going to be entitled to lesser benefits if they suffer injuries from here on out. We saw attacks on the people that make safe and secure buildings and construction projects. So we're going to get back to treating our workers with dignity and respect in the workplace, reverse those changes, and actually start making progress. So people choose to come to Iowa for a quality of life, knowing they'll be respected and have rights in the workplace.
So you're going to ask them to repeal legislation that the Republican-led legislature enacted. Mr. Norris, what would be the first bill that you would ask legislators to pass?
Well, the appropriations usually comes later in the process, but the most important thing we need to do is fund education. It's the backbone. When I think of Iowa values, it's love for the land, sense of community, and that fundamental belief that public education is the great equal opportunity provider. We have just woefully inadequately funded education over the last several years in this state, and we've got some catching up to do to build a future for our children and for this state.
Ms. Glasson, what would be the first bill that you would ask the legislature to pass?
My first day in office, I'm going to call on the legislature to increase the minimum wage to $15 an hour. And as governor, I will actually use my executive authority to make sure that state contracts with our employees are at a minimum wage of $15 an hour. And also ensure that any state contracts done by any companies with the state of Iowa are on a path to the $15 minimum wage for their employees as well. I will veto any anti-labor legislation that crosses my desk as governor, and I'll work to make sure that the principals, anyone doing business with state government that gets any taxpayer dollars has to meet guiding principles to let their workers form a union without intimidation and fear.
Mr. Wilburn, what is number one for you?
Appropriations do come a little later in the process, but there's some things layered along with education, K-12 education and higher education. We can layer in some comprehensive mental health care and make sure that it's available and accessible for youth and families that are struggling with untapped potential because young people are not fully engaged at school.
Ms. McGuire?
I would go to healthcare, because we've got 600,000 Iowans who are suffering under this Medicaid mess. You know, I hear stories every day about dads whose special needs kids are going to have to be put in institutions. I hear about moms who have disabled children who have to drive an hour and a half to get them care. So I think that's really an emergency, and we need to do that right away. And that has a corollary of also helping with mental health, substance abuse, and addiction, because some of the payment methods we're doing right now are really hurting that. You know, we have 120,000 people who probably have serious mental illness in this state that we are not giving the resources to. We're 50th in mental health beds, 47th in providers, and honestly, everybody knows that we've turned our law enforcement into our first-line mental health providers. So I think that's something that I would want to do at the beginning to make sure that patients are taken care of.
And Mr. Hubbell?
Well, the first thing I would do is not a bill. I would reverse the privatization of Medicaid on day one and start the process of bringing that back into our state. The first bill I would do is to fully fund pre-K and K-12 public education.
Let me ask the...
Before you go to that, any of you want to react to anything that's been said here about the first priority?
Obviously, you asked for a bill of legislation, but by executive action, the most important thing the governor